Welcome back to my channel at The Movie Optimist, where I try and find the silver linings in even the worst of films. We are now firmly in 2026, and with that comes a slew of massive movies. This is supposed to be one of the biggest years for movie theaters and movies in general. We have a lot of heavy hitters coming out, and I wanted to make a list about my 10 most anticipated. Now, ideally, I would make like a top 30 list because there's just so many, but for the sake of saving you all hours, I decided to couple it down to 10, but I do have some honorable mentions, which are just 5 outside of the top 10 that I really struggled with, but if I had like a top 15, they would be on it. The first honorable mention is Return to Silent Hill, not because I necessarily love the first 2 movies that came out, but Return to Silent Hill is supposed to be a faithful adaptation to Silent Hill 2, which is my favorite Silent Hill video game of all time, and I'm just really excited to see if they could pull that off, because as much as it's a horror story, it's also a story of trauma and loss, and I think if done right, it could be a really great horror movie with a ton of heart, which you don't often see in horror movies, and I'm just really curious to see how they bring that to life. Another honorable mention is The Mandalorian and Grogu. Don't get me wrong, I love Star Wars, and if it was one of the sequel trilogy movies or anything like that, it would have been in my top 10, but the fact of the matter is the last season of The Mandalorian and Grogu was absolutely awful, and I know that it has its fans, it has its supporters, but for me personally, I just didn't like it. I loved the first and second season, and season 3 was just such, for me, a slap in the face, because I love this show because I love watching Din and Grogu. Like, that's who I want to see, so the fact that season 3 was this weird passing of the baton to Bo-Katan, like, I like Bo-Katan as a character, but this is the Mandalorian show, and I hear the complaints that, oh, well, it's a show about Mandalorians, so really it could be anyone, it doesn't have to be, like, no. We started this journey with Jin and Grogu, and that's exactly where I want to see it. If they want to make a Bo-Katan show, then make a Bo-Katan show, but don't try and pass the baton to her in season 3 of a very popular show that's popular because of Jin and Grogu. It was just dumb. They sidelined the main character and gave him close to nothing to do until like one of the final episodes, and I was just disappointed. But it's still a Star Wars movie, and I'm very excited about it. If Starfighter was coming out this year, it would be in my top 10 list, but it's not, so we have to give the Star Wars spot to this location in the honorable mentions. Coming up next is Toy Story 5, and that's not to say that I think that this movie is going to be bad. I mean, it's literally, like I said, if there was a top 15 list, it would be in my top 15. But the reason why it's not my top 10 is because this is now the 3rd time that we're going to be saying goodbye to these characters, and although it's worked the last 2 times, like Toy Story 3 came out and we said goodbye to these characters, and it was one of the greatest send-offs in a trilogy ever. But then someone was like, I have a story to tell, and they went off and did Toy Story 4, and then we got another send-off that was really beautiful, and now we're getting another one, and there is this little fear that we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but it's Toy Story, they've never let me down, and I am excited about it, so it's in my honorable mentions. Coming up next is The Dog Stars. It's no secret, though, that I am not a big fan of Ridley Scott anymore. I love his earlier work like Gladiator and Blade Runner and, you know, the first Alien, but I haven't really liked a lot of his recent stuff. The Last Duel wasn't that good. I hated Napoleon. I thought it was crazy that someone somewhere in a boardroom thought it was a good idea to make a movie about Napoleon, but focus on his toxic love story. Not for nothing, but the target audience that's going to show up to see a Napoleon movie are showing up to see this guy be an absolute badass at war and see his war strategies and see a lot of nonstop violence and action and war planning and tactics, but instead we got a toxic love story, and it gave me a bad taste in my mouth with Ridley Scott. Gladiator 2 was okay. I liked it. I didn't hate it. I thought it was fun, but it was nowhere near as good as the original. But I really, really, really like Jacob Elordi, especially after seeing his performance in Frankenstein, and he is the main character of this movie, and it's supposed to be a futuristic sci-fi action adventure, and that's not something that Ridley Scott has really done since Blade Runner. So I'm really excited to see what they do there. And lastly on my honorable mentions is Evil Dead Burn. I love the Evil Dead franchise. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time. Ash is one of the most iconic action heroes with his boomstick and his chainsaw for a fist, and I was absolutely obsessed with the first 3 films, and I was skeptical when they were coming out with the remake, and I wound up actually really liking the remake by Fede Alvarez, even though they kind of swapped the role of main character. The Ash character, who wasn't called Ash, was still kind of Ash, but they ultimately kill him in the end and let his sister, where in the original she gets possessed by a monster and turns into a zombie or a demon or a deadite, if you will, and he winds up killing her. In the remake, they flip the tables and they kill Ash and she's alive, and I was really interested to see where that was going to go. Then we never got anywhere with that, and they decided to like do a soft sequel reboot that had nothing to do with that one, Evil Dead Rise, and I really wound up loving that one. I thought it was really good, and this is supposed to be a direct continuation from that one, so I'm excited to see where that goes. Now, for my top 10, coming in at number 10 is Terrifier 4. This is a franchise that I did not watch until long after Terrifier 3 came out. I don't really love the extreme violence in these movies. Now, I like violence. I like violence in movies. I like action. I like good action. I like gore, like in The Thing. But the Terrifier was always just a little too fetishy for me. Like, they went too over the top. Like, you're peeling a woman's skin back and pouring salt in it and just scalping her. Like, I don't know. It just seemed too excessive for my likings. But then I kept seeing in the headlines that Terrifier 3 made like $100 million off of a $2 million budget. And then I started to become a filmmaker myself, where I started getting into the world of cinematography, and I'm aware of how hard it is to make a movie and get it financed and produced. So the fact that this guy started off all the way back, it's not even Terrifier 1. He made like a little short film for like 20 grand, which sounds like a lot to people like us, but in the world of movies, you know, they spend 20 million on movies, so 20 grand is nothing. And he made this little short that was part of an anthology film that went on to become successful, and then he got to do Terrifier 2 and then Terrifier 3, and they made Terrifier 3 for like $2 million, and it made $100 million. And I was so fascinated by that I wound up just tuning in to check it out because I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. And although I do think the violence is kind of gross, I think that the main lead female in it is an absolute badass icon and a wonderful leading lady, one of the best since Ripley, and I wound up really loving this franchise. And supposedly the fourth one is supposed to be the end, so I'm really excited to see where that goes. Coming in at number 9 is Cold Storage, and I guarantee most people on the planet don't know what this is, but it's a movie with Liam Neeson and, yes, Stranger Things guy Joe Keery, Steve Harrington himself. I am not ashamed to admit that the only reason I am excited for this movie is because it is Joe Keery in it. It is a Stranger Things-like movie where him and Liam Neeson are battling against some kind of goo-like aliens that take over this small town in the middle of nowhere. Seems very Stranger Things inspired, and I think that was the point. I only learned of this movie after seeing the Stranger Things season 5 finale in theaters, and they played this trailer alongside with it, and I think that if not for Stranger Things being the most popular show on the planet, this would have probably went straight to streaming, but they're trying to capitalize on Joe Keery's fame right now. I mean, he did just dethrone Taylor Swift with that song that everyone loves from him. I forgot what it's called, Going Back to Chicago or whatever, but there is this void in my heart from Stranger Things. It's my favorite TV show of all time, just behind Breaking Bad, so of course I'm going to gravitate towards something that's going to make me feel like I'm back home in the Stranger Things world. We don't really see Joe Keery a lot because he focuses more on his musical career, and that is why this is coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 8 is Clayface. I love the DCU. It's no secret. Growing up, I read DC and Marvel comics, but my favorite character of all time is Batman, and I am convinced that we are going to get our first sighting of Batman in a Clayface movie, and a lot of people are like, oh, they're not going to waste the introduction of Batman in this smaller little body horror film from Warner Brothers called Clayface, but when you really break it down and think about it, who is going to stop Clayface? Like, who's going to stop him? It's part of James Gunn's DCU. Cops can't shoot him. SWAT can't shoot him. Who is going to stop him if not for Batman? So I do think Batman might show up at the end of this film, but that's not really why I'm fully excited for it. Yes, that's one of the reasons, but one of the reasons is also because it's just a tragic story about a guy that so desperately wants to be seen. He wants to be this big actor, but nobody takes him seriously, and then this accident happens to him, and it's this tragic body dysmorphia type horror tale that he goes kind of crazy because he turns into clay, and Batman has to show up and stop him. And I think that it's also very unique to get a movie in a superhero universe that's a body horror rated R film. Marvel doesn't have the cojones to do that, and the fact that DC is willing to do that, it excites me that DC is willing to go in territories that Marvel normally isn't, because they're predominantly just a family-friendly company, whereas Warner Brothers is like, we're gonna have family-friendly films like Superman, but you'll also have these really dark, violent, gothic body horror like movies like Clayface. So that's really exciting to me. Coming in at number 7 is Zach Cregger's Resident Evil. The other Resident Evil films are all total piles of garbage. If you asked me 15 years ago when they first came out if I liked them, I would have said yes, because I was kind of blinded by the fact that I was just happy we were getting Resident Evil movies, because Resident Evil is my favorite video game franchise of all time. After Barbarian came out, I realized that Zach Cregger was an incredible filmmaker, and then Weapons came out, and it was in my top 5 favorite films of the year of 2025. I think he's such a master at tension and horror, and I've seen in interviews him talking about how he wants to bring his Resident Evil movie back to what makes the game so creepy, and that's long, dark hallways, very limited ammo, hearing things in the darkness that you can't see, just knowing something's coming at you, and just scaring the shit out of you. And it's about this carrier that gets trapped in a hospital or something like that. Personally, I think it's going to wind up being Leon, but time will tell. I'm just really interested to see what Zach Cregger does here. I trust him with this franchise, my favorite video game franchise of all time, and I just can't wait to see what he does. Coming in at number 6 is Project Hail Mary. This is a new movie by Phil and Lord Miller, and it stars Ryan Gosling, and it's a big space adventure where they take this scientist in Ryan Gosling and send him into space to try and save the planet from dying, because they find out that this other planet is dying. Actually, lots of planets are dying all over the place, but there's one planet that isn't. So they send him to investigate why, in the hopes that he could find some kind of cure to cure their planet Earth, our planet, before it goes extinct. And along the way, he meets an alien that's trying to do the same thing for the alien's planet, and they wind up forming a friendship and teaming up and trying to figure it out together. And I don't know anything about the book, but I do know a lot of people that read the book that said it's one of the best books they've ever read, and that they wouldn't be surprised if this is the movie of the year and wins the Oscar of 2027. And that really blew me away. I love Ryan Gosling, I love a space adventure, and I love a movie with a ton of heart, which apparently this movie has. And I also love Phil and Lord Miller. They're just such incredible filmmakers, so I'm just deliriously excited for this film to see what all the hype is about. Coming in at number 5 is Spider-Man Brand New Day. My second favorite superhero of all time is Captain America, but my third is Spider-Man. And I think that if you look at it as a whole, Tom Holland has the best trilogy of all time. I don't think any of his movies are better than Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire, and I think that Andrew Garfield is also the best Spider-Man, but Spider-Man 2 is definitely the best live-action Spider-Man movie ever made. 1 is great, it's not as good as 2, and 3 is just terrible. But all of Tom Holland's are consistently at least great. And now they're coming out with a 4th one, and one of my biggest problems with those first 3 Spider-Man films is the lack of violence on Spider-Man's end. I get it, in the comics, he uses his webs, he's not really like a kung fu guy, but I just like when Spider-Man's like somersault kicking people and punching them into walls and stuff like that. Like, I like the more visceral, violent Spider-Man that Tobey Maguire was, where he's like Superman punching people. Even Andrew Garfield was a little bit more hands-on in terms of fisticuffs when it came to fighting bad guys. Tom Holland used his web slingers almost like guns, where he didn't really have to get up close and personal and fight people. But now they have the director of Shang-Chi coming in, and you know that dude's gonna make Tom Holland Spider-Man in this new movie an absolute badass, and we're gonna have probably some of the best Spider-Man fight scenes we've ever seen. And then you couple that where he's teaming up with the Punisher to take on a Raging Hulk, which we haven't seen a Raging Hulk in a very long time. So I'm very excited about that. And I also wouldn't be surprised if Daredevil makes an appearance. It's protecting the little guys. It's staying the hero of Hell's Kitchen. There's no reason to believe that Spider-Man and Punisher wouldn't run into Daredevil at some point in this. And I think it's going to make for a really cool 3-way team-up movie where everyone's going to lose their minds when Daredevil shows up. And I'm just really excited for it. Coming in at number 4 is Disclosure Day. It's the new movie by Steven Spielberg about aliens making contact. Emily Blunt's in it, and one of the main characters from Knives Out, the latest one, I forgot what it was called, but it's the one that takes place around the church. It was really good, and the lead character in that was amazing, and he's the main character in this, and it's also Steven Spielberg. He is the greatest director of all time. No other director has done excellence in every genre. You look at Steven Spielberg, he nailed it in horror with Jaws, he nails it in action with Indiana Jones, and he directed scenes of Star Wars. He nails it with sci-fi with things like E.T. and War of the Worlds, Close Encounters of the Third Kind or Fourth Kind, I can't remember. He can nail it in a musical with West Side Story. Now he's going back to his science fiction roots. He could also do comedy like Catch Me If You Can. The guy could literally do it all, and not many people can. So I'm always gonna put him or one of his movies that are like this. I don't like a lot of the movies that he does that are like Bridge of Spies. That's not a me movie. I find those movies very boring, but when he does these genre pieces, things that are action-packed or science fiction-like Ready Player One, it's always going to shoot to the top of my list because he always knocks it out of the park. He always delivers. He is the greatest director of all time, and he's back to his roots of sci-fi. How could I not have it on my list? So it comes in at number 4. At number 3 is Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Christopher Nolan is my favorite director of all time. I love Matt Damon. I love the tale of The Odyssey. I think that Nolan utilizes practicality in a way that a lot of directors don't, and when I heard that he was creating a giant life-size Cyclops for Matt Damon to battle, I was like, of course you fucking are, and that's why you're gonna take my money when I see this film 15 times in theaters. It's my favorite director making an action, sword and sandals, epic science fiction movie with Matt Damon. How can it not be in my top 3? Coming in at number 2 is Supergirl. I loved Superman. It was my favorite movie of 2025. It took my number 1 spot. I love the DC universe. I love seeing it build out and grow into something that's eventually going to have a James Gunn type Justice League, and Supergirl is the next story in that saga, unless Lanterns comes out first. Maybe that comes out first, but Lanterns is a show, it's not a movie. So in terms of movies, this is the next chapter. They're basing it off of the Woman of Tomorrow story arc, which is really dark, about her just hating the world and then having to go on a revenge quest after someone she really loves gets hurt really bad. And I'm just just really excited to see where it goes and how it's going to build out this universe that I've been reading the comics of for so long. We almost had a good one with Zack Snyder, and say what you will if you like it. It wasn't the Justice League stuff that I like. It wasn't the comics or the cartoons that I grew up watching brought to life. Zack Snyder tried to take it a very dark and grounded route, and that's fine for the people that like it, but for me, I wanted the brighter, more colorful, more Sunday morning cartoon type Justice League, and it seems like that's what James Gunn is giving me, so it's hard for me to not put it as number 2 on my list. But coming in at number 1, guys, and if anyone expected any different, or anyone has this not in their number 1, I think you guys are fucking crazy, and that's Avengers Doomsday. First of all, it's an Avengers film, so right there, that would put it in anybody's top 5. But we're also getting back the X-Men, which were made a thing long before the MCU was a thing. The X-Men is kind of what started the groundwork for modern day superhero movies. You could say that Tim Burton did it with Batman, but X-Men kind of started that vibe that you can make them a little bit more like Tim Burton's Batman movies were serious, don't get me wrong. They were very far detached from the comics, but the X-Men felt like they took a comic book, brought it to life, but made it mature. It just felt different than the Burtonverse, and that formula is still being used today in the MCU, which is why the MCU is so beloved. Kevin Feige worked on the X-Men films before becoming the president of the MCU. On top of that, my favorite character from the animated series is Cyclops, and he was done so dirty in X-Men 3. And I've been longing for the day where I got to see a badass, comic-accurate Cyclops in the MCU. And not only are we going to get to see that, we're going to get to see it in an Avengers movie where he's going to get to meet Captain America. He's going to get to meet Spider-Man, and he's going to get to meet Deadpool, and he's going to get to meet Thor. And you have that shot in the trailer where he takes the goggles off and he lets off that sonic blast up into the sky, and it's this big, massive explosion coming out of his eyes. And I couldn't help but get teared up watching that. The Cap trailer didn't make me get hyped. The Thor trailer didn't let me get hyped, especially after Thor Love and Thunder, which I thought was really bad. It seems like the Russo brothers understand the assignment. They're bringing it back to what made the Avengers special. They're bringing me the Cyclops that I've always wanted. We're getting the X-Men back. We're going to get all of these interactions between all of these characters. I cannot breathe. I am so excited when I think about it, and it's so hard to sit here and not put it as my number 1. I do think it's going to be the biggest movie, not the biggest movie, one of the biggest movies of all time. I don't think it's going to quite hit the Avatar 1 numbers just because that movie's had multiple re-releases and it was way ahead of its time in terms of technology and bringing the world something they've never seen before. But I do think that this Avengers movie is going to be a $2 billion movie, and I think it's going to be the biggest film of the year, and I think it's going to be the most crowd-pleasing film of the year. So it takes my number 1 spot. But what say you guys? Are any of these movies on your list? Would you rearrange my list around and put other movies in number 1 and move things around? Let's talk about it down below. Let me hear your list. Rattle them off. Maybe you have movies on yours that didn't even make it into my top 15. Let's talk about it down below. And as always, guys, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll catch you next time.